The Rio Grande Valley hasn't seen a pandemic like the one we're living through in more than half a century. But there have been some deadly ones, especially around the time that Brownsville was first founded. Here's Cameron County Commissioner Jean Fernandez with this week's very timely Throwback Thursday.
What we're going to talk about today is very, very pertinent for the time. Let's go back to biblical times when you had the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. You had death, you had famine, you had war, and you had pestilence. Pestilence is the key word for the day. Pestilence means plagues, and you can understand why. Now let's get specifically to Brownsville and South Texas and how they played into this whole scenario. On the forming of Brownsville in 1848, immediately thereafterwards there was a huge yellow fever plague, and it claimed 1/3 of all the inhabitants of the area. As evidence of Brownsville's involvement in the plague, yellow fever, this area of the old city cemetery was first established in 1858 as a result of the mass deaths due to the malady. Yellow fever, 1858. 1858. 1858. An interesting note that was written in the annals of our medical history at Fort Brown in particular stated that there were so many people dying and there were various levels of comatose conditions of the affected that they were wondering if this person is dead or not. So what they did was they tied a string around the little finger, and they came back in an hour, and if that finger was swollen, the person was alive. If it weren't, they were buried. In Brownsville in particular, there was a very, very prominent historical feature that entered the picture, and that was Dr. Gorgas. Dr. Gorgas started studying yellow fever back at the end of the 19th century. The world was devastated by yellow fever because you had the Panama Canal, you had the Spanish-American War, and there were more troops that died from the malady than there were that actually died in warfare. Dr. Gorgas did not discover yellow fever from mosquitoes. It was actually discovered or brought to the focus of medical science by a Cuban doctor, Dr. Carlos Fendley. Now, he put things together in order to figure out that mosquitoes were probably the vector that caused this disease. But it was Dr. Gorgas and his initial work that was done right here at Fort Brown that solved that riddle and went down into the pages of history. There's a common factor that enters the picture in the majority of these maladies, these viruses, and that is that they need a vector. A vector means that they are carried by a flea, a rat, a mosquito, or a bat. And so those were the ones that were the carriers of these great epidemics. The people in the early days did not figure this out until far, far, far too late. And then they started taking measures. Early on in the history of the treatment of these viruses and epidemics, it was understood that you had to quarantine. Now that is so prevalent to what we have going on in today's world. They recognized that you had to isolate various pockets of people that were, say, infested with the disease, and they did so. They did so religiously. The early writings of the colonization of Brownsville pointed out that there were fines and the military was involved. If you crossed the quarantine line, you definitely suffered. It is a great lament that South Texas and northern Mexico has had an affair with this death angel. It has changed the entire procedure as to how we colonize this part of the world. Many people went well before their time, and the efforts that were taken by the people that survived were built upon to keep us where we are today, alive. And the rest is history. For KVEO News, I'm Eugene Fernandez.
To take a look at our library of history stories on valleycentral.com, just type in Throwback Thursday for a full list.